The Andes Mountains, once the heart of a mighty empire, echoed with the sounds of war and despair. In the final years of the 16th century, the last remnants of the Inca civilization clung to survival in the remote jungles of Vilcabamba. Once rulers of a vast domain stretching from modern-day Colombia to Chile, the Incas now found themselves cornered, their cities burned, their people scattered, and their leaders hunted like animals. This was not merely a battle for land or power, it was a desperate fight for identity, culture, and survival. At the center of this struggle stood two opposing forces: the Spanish conquistadors, determined to erase all traces of native rule, and the last Inca emperors, who refused to surrender their heritage. What had once been a thriving civilization under the rule of the Sapa Inca had been shattered by betrayal, disease, and ruthless conquest. Francisco Pizarro's capture of Atahualpa in 1532 had marked the beginning of the end, but it was far from the final chapter. Even as Spanish rule tightened its grip on Cusco, the sacred capital of the empire, resistance flared in the hidden valleys of Vilcabamba. Here, in a fortress city deep within the jungle, the last free Inca rulers waged a guerrilla war against their conquerors. But could they hold out forever? Would the spirit of the empire endure beyond the fall of its last stronghold? The story of Cusco versus Vilcabamba is one of defiance, desperation, and the final stand of a dying empire. For centuries, the Inca Empire had thrived under a system of centralized rule, where the Sapa Inca held absolute authority over millions of subjects across the Andes. The empire's success lay in its sophisticated road networks, agricultural terraces, and tightly organized society. However, this unity was shattered in 1529 when a brutal civil war erupted between two brothers, Huáscar and Atahualpa, both claiming the right to rule after the death of their father, Emperor Huayna Capac. The conflict drained the empire's resources and left it vulnerable at a time when foreign invaders were approaching from the west. By the time Atahualpa emerged victorious, the empire was weakened, its leadership fractured, and its people exhausted. It was into this fragile landscape that Francisco Pizarro and his Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1532, setting the stage for the empire's collapse. The Spanish conquest did not happen overnight. Though Pizarro captured Atahualpa in Cajamarca in November 1532, the Spaniards still faced fierce resistance from Inca generals and local leaders unwilling to accept foreign rule. Manco Inca initially installed by the Spaniards as a puppet ruler in Cusco, soon realized that the invaders sought total domination rather than cooperation. In 1536, he led a massive uprising, nearly driving the Spaniards out of the city before retreating to the mountains. His escape marked the birth of a new Inca stronghold, Vilcabamba, the final refuge of a crumbling empire. From this hidden base, Manco and his successors would wage a decades-long resistance against Spanish rule, turning the Andes into a battleground where the fate of a civilization hung in the balance. After fleeing Cusco in 1536, Manco Inca Yupanqui sought refuge in the dense jungles of Vilcabamba, a remote valley nestled deep in the Andes. Unlike the highland cities of the Inca Empire, which had fallen to Spanish forces, Vilcabamba offered natural defenses: steep cliffs, thick forests, and treacherous terrain that made large-scale invasions nearly impossible. Here, Manco established a new capital, known today as Espiritu Pampa, where he rebuilt his court and gathered loyal warriors, priests, and artisans. Though stripped of the grandeur of Cusco, Vilcabamba became the last bastion of Inca resistance, a symbol of defiance against European domination. Despite its isolation, Vilcabamba was not a primitive hideout. Manco worked tirelessly to maintain the traditions of his ancestors, preserving Inca religious practices, administrative structures, and military discipline. Yet even as he resisted,
Manco knew that survival depended more than just on force. He sent envoys to other indigenous groups, seeking alliances that might help repel the invaders. Some tribes joined his cause, while others remained neutral or sided with the Spaniards, fearing retribution. Meanwhile, rumors spread among the Spaniards of a powerful Inca stronghold hidden in the jungle, fueling their determination to crush the rebellion once and for all. As Vilcabamba took shape, a bitter ideological divide emerged between the Spanish-backed rulers in Cusco and the exiled Inca dynasty in the jungle. The Spaniards, eager to legitimize their control, installed puppet monarchs such as Manco Inca and later Cristobal Paucar Yupanqui, both of whom pledged loyalty to the crown of Spain. These figures were used to justify colonial rule, presenting a facade of continuity while stripping the Inca elite of real power. Meanwhile, in Vilcabamba, Manco Inca and his successors rejected these imposed rulers, insisting that only a true Sapa Inca, one chosen by bloodline and divine right, could lead the empire. This dispute over legitimacy became a central theme in the ongoing conflict, shaping the political and cultural landscape of the Andes for decades. The struggle was not only about power, but also about identity. For the people of Vilcabamba, resisting Spanish rule meant preserving the spiritual and social fabric of their civilization. They continued to worship the sun god Inti, perform sacred rituals, and uphold traditional governance. In contrast, those who accepted Spanish authority in Cusco faced immense pressure to convert to Christianity and adopt European customs. This division created a painful rift among the Andean people. Some saw collaboration as a means of survival, while others viewed it as betrayal. As tensions mounted, the question remained, could a divided people withstand the relentless advance of foreign rule?
Manco Inca Yupanqui understood that direct confrontation with the Spanish would be disastrous. Instead, he adopted a strategy of guerrilla warfare, using the rugged terrain of Vilcabamba to his advantage. His warriors launched sudden attacks on Spanish supply lines, ambushed isolated patrols, and vanished into the jungle before reinforcements could arrive. These tactics frustrated the Spanish, who struggled to adapt to the unfamiliar environment. The dense forests, steep ravines, and unpredictable weather turned every campaign into a nightmare. Disease, exhaustion, and dwindling supplies plagued Spanish expeditions, forcing them to retreat without achieving their objectives. Yet Manco did not rely solely on ambushes and hit-and-run tactics. He also sought to undermine Spanish authority in the broader region by encouraging revolts among subject peoples. Many Andean communities resented Spanish rule and responded eagerly to Manco's call for resistance. Uprisings flared across the countryside, targeting Spanish garrisons and colonial officials. These rebellions disrupted trade, damaged infrastructure, and sowed fear among the invaders. Despite these successes, Manco knew that guerrilla warfare alone would not drive the Spaniards from the land. To truly challenge their dominance, he needed allies, both within the Andes and beyond. His next move would determine whether Vilcabamba could survive, or if the last flicker of Inca resistance would be extinguished forever. Manco Inca Yupanqui cast his net wide in search of allies, reaching out to neighboring indigenous nations who shared his hatred for Spanish rule. Among his most promising recruits were the Chunchos, fierce warriors from the eastern jungles who had never submitted to Inca authority. Though traditionally independent, many Chunchos saw the Spanish as a greater threat than the Incas and agreed to join Manco's cause. Their knowledge of the rainforest proved invaluable, guiding Inca raiders through treacherous terrain and teaching them how to navigate the dense vegetation. With their support, Manco expanded his reach beyond Vilcabamba, striking at Spanish settlements along the edge of the jungle frontier.
Beyond the Andes, Manco sought aid from unexpected sources. He dispatched emissaries to the Portuguese in Brazil, hoping to secure weapons and supplies in exchange for gold and silver. Though some contact was made, the Portuguese hesitated to provoke Spain, fearing retaliation from their powerful Iberian rival. More promising was Manco's outreach to dissident Spanish factions. Some conquistadors, disillusioned by the rigid bureaucracy of colonial rule, sympathized with the Inca cause. A few even defected, bringing valuable military expertise and firearms to Vilcabamba. However, these alliances were fragile, and betrayal lurked around every corner. The very presence of foreigners in the jungle kingdom raised suspicions among Manco's own followers, planting the seeds of internal strife that would soon threaten the stability of his fragile resistance. The fragile unity of Vilcabamba began to unravel, as internal divisions and external betrayals threatened Manco Inca Yupanqui's leadership. While he had successfully rallied warriors and forged uneasy alliances, trust within his ranks was tenuous. Rival factions within the Inca nobility questioned his decisions. Some believed he should have pursued outright peace with the Spanish, rather than perpetual war. Others resented his reliance on foreign deserters, fearing that their presence undermined the purity of Inca tradition. These tensions simmered beneath the surface until they erupted in violence. In 1544, Manco fell victim to a plot orchestrated by three Spanish fugitives, Diego de Mena, Alonso Martin, and Hernando Ponce, who had once fought for him but now conspired against him. Promised riches and clemency by the Spanish authorities, they lured Manco into a false sense of security before attacking him inside his own palace. The emperor fought fiercely, killing one of his attackers before being overwhelmed. His body was buried in secret, and with his death, the resistance suffered a devastating blow. Without his leadership, Vilcabamba teetered on the brink of collapse. Yet even in death, Manco's legacy endured, as his sons vowed to continue the struggle for their people's freedom. Though Manco Inca Yupanqui's death dealt a severe blow to the resistance, the fire he ignited did not die with him. His son, Saidi Tupac, inherited the throne of Vilcabamba at just 5 years old, too young to wield true authority. Power instead rested in the hands of advisors and military commanders who struggled to maintain cohesion in the face of growing dissent. Some factions urged negotiation with the Spanish, hoping for a peaceful resolution that would preserve what little autonomy remained. Others, hardened by years of war, insisted on continuing the fight at any cost. This internal division weakened Vilcabamba's position, making it easier for the Spanish to exploit their enemies' fractures. Despite these challenges, the resistance endured. Saidi Tupac's regions fortified the jungle stronghold, reinforcing its defenses and maintaining supply routes through sympathetic Andean communities. Meanwhile, Spanish authorities in Lima debated how best to deal with the lingering threat. Some advocated for a full-scale invasion, while others believed offering concessions might tempt the Incas into submission. In 1557, Saidi Tupac, now a teenager, made a fateful decision. He agreed to meet with Spanish representatives under the condition that his people's lands and traditions be respected. What followed would shape the future of Vilcabamba and test the resilience of the last Inca dynasty.
Saidi Tupac's decision to negotiate with the Spanish marked a pivotal moment in the history of Vilcabamba. In 1558, under the watchful eyes of both Inca and Spanish officials, the young emperor traveled to Cusco to meet with Viceroy Andrés Hurtado de Mendoza. The meeting was carefully orchestrated, designed to present the appearance of reconciliation while masking the deep mistrust on both sides.
Sayri Tupac, dressed in royal Inca garments, was granted an audience with the viceroy, who offered him gifts and assurances of protection. In return, the emperor was expected to abandon his claims to independence and submit to Spanish authority. The terms of the agreement were ambiguous. Sayri Tupac was given a large estate near Cusco, where he and his followers could live in relative comfort, but he was required to renounce his rule over Vilcabamba. Many of his advisors feared this was a trap, a way for the Spanish to dismantle the last Inca stronghold without resorting to open war. Others saw it as an opportunity to preserve their people's dignity and secure a future under Spanish rule. Ultimately, Sayri Tupac accepted the offer, leaving Vilcabamba behind and relocating to the heart of former Inca territory. His departure signaled a temporary truce, but the question remained: would this peace last, or was it merely a pause before the next storm? Even as Sayri Tupac settled into life near Cusco, the remnants of Vilcabamba did not vanish. His younger brother, Titu Cusi Yupanqui, refused to recognize the treaty, viewing it as a betrayal of their father's struggle. Titu Cusi remained in the jungle stronghold, rallying those who still believed in armed resistance. Under his leadership, Vilcabamba became a shadow kingdom, an elusive, semi-independent enclave that defied Spanish control. Though smaller in size and population than during Manco Inca's reign, it persisted as a symbol of Inca defiance. Titu Cusi adopted a different approach than his predecessors. Rather than launching large-scale offensives, he focused on diplomacy and selective resistance. He maintained communication with sympathetic Andine leaders, ensuring that the idea of an independent Inca state never fully disappeared. He also engaged in negotiations with Spanish missionaries, allowing limited Christian influence in exchange for autonomy. This cautious balancing act allowed Vilcabamba to survive for another decade, though always under the looming threat of Spanish conquest. Meanwhile, Sayri Tupac's fate in Cusco remained uncertain. Would he find peace under Spanish rule, or would the past come back to haunt him? Sayri Tupac's life in Cusco was short-lived. In 1561, barely 3 years after his arrival, he died suddenly under suspicious circumstances. Spanish records claimed he succumbed to illness, but whispers of poison spread quickly among his followers. Some suspected jealous rivals within the colonial administration, but others pointed to rogue elements within the Inca nobility who saw Sayri Tupac's submission as a betrayal. His death sent shockwaves through both the Spanish court and the Andean world. In Cusco, his supporters mourned deeply, seeing his passing as yet another sign of the empire's irreversible decline. In Vilcabamba, Titu Cusi Yupanqui reacted with fury, interpreting his brother's death as proof that the Spanish could never be trusted. With Sayri Tupac gone and diplomacy discarded, Titu Cusi Yupanqui committed himself fully to the war against the Spanish. He fortified Vilcabamba, reinforcing its defenses and preparing for the inevitable assault. His warriors, fueled by grief and anger, launched increasingly aggressive raids on Spanish outposts, targeting mines, haciendas, and supply convoys. The jungle stronghold, once a place of quiet resistance, transformed into a militant bastion of Inca defiance. Yet, Titu Cusi knew that survival depended on more than just combat. He strengthened allyships with nearby Andine communities, ensuring a steady flow of food, weapons, and intelligence. He also maintained careful relations with Spanish missionaries, recognizing that religious diplomacy could buy time and resources. However, the Spanish were no longer willing to tolerate a rebel kingdom in their midst. By the late 1670s, the colonial authorities in Lima had grown impatient with the persistent threat posed by Vilcabamba. Reports of Inca uprisings, destroyed missions, and slain settlers reached the ears of Viceroy Francisco de Toledo, who saw the jungle stronghold as a stain on Spanish sovereignty. Determined to bring the conflict to a decisive end, Toledo planned a full-scale invasion, one that would leave no room for negotiation. Viceroy Francisco de Toledo, newly appointed to govern Peru, viewed Vilcabamba as the last obstacle to complete Spanish control over the Andes. A seasoned administrator and military strategist, Toledo believed that prolonged tolerance of the Inca stronghold would only encourage further rebellion. In 1572, he assembled a formidable expeditionary force, consisting of Spanish cavalry, musketeers, and thousands of indigenous auxiliaries drawn from rival Andine groups. His plan was simple: surround Vilcabamba, cut off its supply lines, and destroy it utterly. Toledo's campaign was meticulously organized. He divided his forces into 3 columns, each tasked with advancing from a different direction to encircle the jungle stronghold. One column, led by Captain Martín García Óñez de Loyola, moved from the east, following the Apurimac River toward Vilcabamba. Another, commanded by Captain Álvaro de Ocampo, advanced from the north, securing key passes and mountain trails. The third, under the command of Governor Juan Jufre, approached from the south, ensuring that no escape route remained open. With superior firepower, disciplined troops, and logistical support from allied Andean leaders, Toledo aimed to deliver a crushing blow to the last remnants of Inca resistance. On June 1, 1572, Spanish forces entered the heart of Vilcabamba, finding it eerily abandoned. Titu Cusi Yupanqui had sensed the impending attack and ordered a strategic retreat deeper into the jungle. His warriors melted into the dense foliage, leaving behind their homes, temples, and granaries. The Spanish, expecting a decisive battle, found themselves facing an empty city. Yet their mission was not to occupy, but to eliminate. They looted what remained, set fire to buildings, and desecrated sacred sites, signaling the end of the last Inca stronghold. Though Vilcabamba itself had fallen, Titu Cusi continued to resist. He led his people deeper into the wilderness, launching sporadic attacks on Spanish patrols and supply lines. However, the loss of their capital weakened morale, and many of his followers began to doubt whether the struggle could continue. Some deserted, seeking refuge in Spanish-controlled towns, while others pleaded for peace. Titu Cusi, however, remained defiant. He sent urgent messages to distant Andean communities, urging them to rise against the invaders. But the response was tepid. Many had already accepted Spanish rule, fearing reprisals if they supported the doomed resistance. Disease and attrition took their toll. Without the stability of a fixed settlement, food supplies dwindled and sickness spread rapidly. Titu Cusi himself fell ill, suffering from fever and weakness. In the midst of this crisis, a final betrayal struck. On October 24, 1572, Titu Cusi Yupanqui died under mysterious circumstances. Some accounts claim he was poisoned by a Spanish missionary, while others suggest he succumbed to natural causes. Whatever the truth, his death marked the end of effective Inca resistance. With their leader gone, the remaining warriors surrendered to the Spanish, bringing the 4-decade struggle of Cusco versus Vilcabamba to a close. With the death of Titu Cusi Yupanqui and the fall of Vilcabamba, the last vestiges of independent Inca rule vanished. The surviving members of the royal family, including Tupac Amaru, Titu Cusi's half-brother and heir, were captured and taken to Cusco. There, they were put on trial by Spanish authorities, accused of treason and rebellion. The trial was a mere formality. Its outcome had been decided long before the proceedings began. On September 24, 1572, Tupac Amaru was publicly executed in the main plaza of Cusco, a grim spectacle intended to signal the final destruction of Inca sovereignty. His death marked the official end of the Inca Empire, a civilization that had once ruled millions across the Andes. The execution of Tupac Amaru was more than a legal proceeding. It was a calculated display of power meant to crush any lingering hopes of resistance. Spanish officials hoped that by eliminating the last Sapa Inca, they would erase the very concept of an independent Andean kingdom. However, the memory of the empire and its struggle did not die with Tupac Amaru. Across the Andes, stories of the fallen rulers and their resistance lived on, passed down through generations, even though Spanish rule sought to erase them. Language, art, and oral histories became crucial tools of cultural survival, passed down through generations, even as Spanish rule sought to erase them. The fall of Vilcabamba did not bring lasting peace. Isolated uprisings continued throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, culminating in the Great Rebellion led by Tupac Amaru II. His namesake, the last Sapa Inca, had been executed nearly 200 years earlier, yet his spirit lived on in the hearts of those who resisted oppression. The struggle for autonomy, though changed in form, never truly ended.
The execution of Tupac Amaru in 1572 was meant to mark the definitive end of Inca resistance. But history has shown that the fire of rebellion does not easily die. Over the centuries, the name Tupac Amaru became a symbol of defiance against colonial rule. When José Gabriel Condorcanqui adopted the name Tupac Amaru II in 1780, he invoked the legacy of the last Inca emperor to rally indigenous and mestizo populations against Spanish oppression. His rebellion, though ultimately crushed, exposed the deep-seated grievances of the Andean people and inspired future movements for independence. Even beyond the 18th century, the struggle for Andean identity persisted. In the 20th and 21st centuries, indigenous rights movements in Peru and across South America drew upon the memory of the Inca resistance, framing their fight not just as a quest for political representation, but as a continuation of a centuries-old struggle for self-determination. The ruins of Vilcabamba, once a forgotten jungle stronghold, became a site of historical and cultural significance, reminding the world that the Andean people had never truly accepted foreign domination. Though the empire itself fell, its spirit endured. The battles of Cusco and Vilcabamba were not just conflicts of the past, they were echoes of a larger, ongoing struggle for justice, identity, and the right to remember. The story of Cusco versus Vilcabamba offers profound lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the enduring nature of cultural identity. The Inca resistance, though ultimately unsuccessful in halting Spanish conquest, demonstrated remarkable tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds. Vilcabamba's ability to survive for nearly 40 years after the fall of Cusco underscores the importance of strategic flexibility in prolonged conflicts. Manco Inca Yupanqui's shift from conventional warfare to guerrilla tactics, his efforts to forge alliances, and his use of diplomacy illustrate the complexities of resistance in a colonial context. Moreover, the conflict highlights the role of ideology in shaping historical outcomes.
The struggle between the Spanish-backed rulers in Cusco and the exiled Inca dynasty in Vilcabamba was not merely a contest for territory. It was a battle over legitimacy, identity, and the right to define the future of the Andes. The persistence of Inca traditions, even after the empire's formal collapse, reveals the difficulty of erasing a civilization's cultural foundations. These lessons remain relevant today as struggles for autonomy, historical recognition, and cultural preservation continue around the world. While the broad strokes of the Inca resistance are well documented, lesser-known details reveal a complex web of intrigue, deception, and resilience. Recent archaeological discoveries in Vilcabamba have challenged long-held assumptions about the nature of the last Inca stronghold. Excavations at Espiritu Pampa, once thought to be a hastily constructed refuge, show evidence of sophisticated urban planning, suggesting that Vilcabamba was more than just a temporary hideout. It was a functioning capital built with long-term survival in mind. Structures aligned with Inca astronomical principles indicate that the spiritual and administrative traditions of the empire persisted even in exile. Another overlooked aspect of the conflict involves the role of African slaves in the final stages of the struggle. Spanish expeditions often included enslaved Africans, some of whom seized opportunities to escape and integrate into indigenous communities. Historical records mention small groups of escaped slaves fighting alongside Inca rebels, blurring the lines between colonial and indigenous resistance. Additionally, documents from Spanish archives reveal that some Inca leaders attempted to send envoys to England, hoping to find an alternate ally against Spanish rule. Though these efforts came to nothing, they underscored the lengths to which the last Incas went to secure their survival. Behind the grand narratives of empires and battles lies the untold suffering of countless individuals caught in the crossfire of history. The prolonged resistance of Vilcabamba came at a devastating human cost, particularly for the common people who bore the brunt of war, displacement, and disease. As Spanish forces tightened their grip on the Andes, entire communities were uprooted, their fields destroyed, and their leaders executed or enslaved. Villages that harbored Inca sympathizers faced brutal reprisals, with men, women, and children subjected to forced labor, torture, or massacre. Disease, introduced by the Europeans, played a cruel role in weakening resistance. Smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through the Andes, decimating populations that had no immunity to these foreign illnesses. The impact was felt even in the secluded jungles of Vilcabamba, where outbreaks weakened the very people fighting to preserve their homeland. Starvation compounded the suffering as Spanish campaigns deliberately targeted food supplies, cutting off access to vital crops and livestock. The resilience of the Andean people was tested beyond measure, yet even amid such hardship, acts of quiet defiance endured. Families secretly practicing their traditions, elders passing down forbidden histories, and warriors refusing to surrender despite overwhelming odds. The struggle between Cusco and Vilcabamba was not just a regional conflict. It was a part of a broader global transformation that reshaped the course of human history. The fall of the Inca Empire occurred during a period of unprecedented European expansion, as Spain, Portugal, England, and France raced to establish colonies across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The events in the Andes mirrored similar struggles unfolding in Mexico, the Philippines, and West Africa, where indigenous civilizations faced the onslaught of foreign powers armed with steel, gunpowder, and disease.
Yet, unlike the Aztec or Mali empires, whose collapses are widely studied, the final resistance of the Incas in Vilcabamba remains relatively obscure outside academic circles.
This oversight speaks to the uneven nature of historical memory, where certain civilizations receive extensive attention while others fade into obscurity. The story of Vilcabamba reminds us that history is not simply written by the victors, but also shaped by those who choose which stories to tell and which to forget. By revisiting this overlooked chapter, we gain a fuller understanding of the global impact of colonialism and the enduring strength of cultures that refuse to vanish. Though the last Inca emperor was executed in 1572, the cultural and spiritual legacy of the Andean people did not disappear. The traditions of the Incas, woven into language, music, festivals, and agricultural practices, continued to thrive in the shadows of Spanish rule. Today, millions of Quechua and Aymara speakers in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and northern Argentina carry forward the heritage of their ancestors, preserving a connection to the past that no empire could sever. Ancient agricultural techniques, such as terrace farming and water management systems, remain in use, proving the ingenuity of Inca engineering. Festivals honoring the sun, moon, and earth persist, blending indigenous beliefs with Catholic traditions in a testament to cultural resilience. The ruins of Cusco and Vilcabamba stand as silent witnesses to a civilization that once ruled the Andes. Machu Picchu, once a royal estate hidden from Spanish invaders, now draws visitors from around the world, offering a glimpse into the grandeur of Inca architecture. The Sacred Valley, once the heart of imperial administration, continues to sustain communities that trace their lineage to the empire's golden age. Even the Quechua language, spoken by millions, serves as a living link to the past, defying centuries of suppression. The fall of the Inca Empire may have marked the end of an era, but it did not erase the identity of a people who, through perseverance and pride, ensured that their history would never be forgotten. Efforts to preserve the memory of Vilcabamba have gained momentum in recent decades, driven by historians, archaeologists, and indigenous activists determined to ensure that the last Inca stronghold is not forgotten. The site of Espiritu Pampa, once shrouded in mystery, has become a focal point for research, with ongoing excavations revealing new insights into daily life, military strategy, and the spiritual practices of the exiled Incas. Scholars have worked to translate and analyze colonial-era documents, shedding light on the complex negotiations, betrayals, and resistance efforts that defined the final years of the empire. At the same time, indigenous communities in the Andes have reclaimed the narrative of Vilcabamba, incorporating its history into educational programs and cultural initiatives. Museums in Cusco and Lima now feature exhibits dedicated to the last Inca rulers, emphasizing their struggle not as a footnote in history, but as a defining chapter in the broader story of Andean resistance. Local guides, many of whom trace their ancestry to the Inca Empire, lead visitors through the ruins of Vilcabamba, recounting the bravery of those who fought to protect their homeland. Through these efforts, the legacy of Vilcabamba lives on, not just as a tale of defeat, but as a testament to the unyielding spirit of a people who refused to be erased. The story of Vilcabamba holds profound relevance in the modern world, offering insights into contemporary struggles for cultural preservation, indigenous rights, and historical justice. Just as the last Inca rulers fought to maintain their identity in the face of colonial domination, modern indigenous communities continued to resist assimilation and demand recognition of their heritage. The battle for land rights, linguistic survival, and political representation echoes the resistance waged in the jungles of Vilcabamba centuries ago. Activists today draw inspiration from the resilience of the Andean people, using history as a foundation for advocacy and education. Furthermore, the fall of the Inca Empire serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked imperialism. The destruction of civilizations, the exploitation of resources, and the erasure of cultural identities remain pressing issues in regions affected by historical colonization. By studying the past, societies can better understand the long-term effects of conquest and work toward meaningful reconciliation. Vilcabamba's legacy reminds us that history is not static. It is a living force that shapes present realities and informs future possibilities. As scholars and activists work to preserve the legacy of the Inca Empire, new technologies and methodologies are helping to uncover lost chapters of Andean history. Advances in satellite imaging, LiDAR scanning, and DNA analysis are revealing previously unknown sites and shedding light on the genetic and cultural connections between modern Andean populations and their Inca ancestors. These discoveries challenge outdated narratives that portray the Inca Empire as a relic of the past, instead demonstrating its enduring influence on contemporary societies.
Museums, universities, and cultural institutions across South America are collaborating to digitize historical records, artifacts, and oral traditions, ensuring that future generations can access and learn from the rich heritage of the Andes. Educational programs in schools emphasize the importance of indigenous history, moving beyond colonial perspectives to provide a more balanced view of the past. Meanwhile, tourism initiatives aim to promote sustainable exploration of Inca sites, balancing economic benefits with the need to protect sacred landscapes from overdevelopment. The fight to preserve Inca heritage is far from over, but with each new discovery and initiative, the story of Vilcabamba and its people becomes more visible. The last stronghold of the Incas may have fallen, but its legacy continues to shape the identity of the Andes, proving that history, when remembered and honored, can never truly be erased. The story of Cusco versus Vilcabamba is not an end point, but rather a gateway to a broader exploration of indigenous resistance across the Americas. The fall of the Inca Empire mirrors the experiences of countless other civilizations that faced European conquest, from the Mapuche of southern Chile to the Maya of Mesoamerica. Each of these societies fought to preserve their lands, languages, and traditions in the face of overwhelming force, and their struggles continue to shape national identities today. Understanding the final stand of the Incas provides a lens through which to examine these wider historical patterns, revealing common themes of resilience, adaptation, and cultural endurance. Beyond the battlefield, the legacy of Vilcabamba invites reflection on the nature of historical memory and the ways in which dominant narratives shape our understanding of the past. Who decides which histories are told and which are forgotten? How do colonial legacies continue to influence modern perceptions of indigenous peoples? These questions extend far beyond the Andes, touching on issues of justice, representation, and the ongoing struggle for cultural recognition. By engaging with these broader themes, we not only honor the memory of those who resisted in Vilcabamba, but also contribute to a more inclusive and accurate understanding of global history. The story of Vilcabamba is more than a tale of conquest and resistance. It is a reminder of the power of memory and the responsibility of each generation to preserve the past. History does not exist in isolation. It is shaped by those who choose to study it, teach it, and pass it on. The voices of the last Inca rulers, their warriors, and their people may have been drowned out by the march of time, but they have not been silenced entirely. Through books, documentaries, museum exhibits, and oral traditions, their legacy continues to speak to those willing to listen. Preserving this history is not merely an academic exercise. It is an act of justice. Recognizing the struggles of the Andean peoples ensures that their sacrifices are not forgotten and that their descendants see their heritage reflected in the broader narrative of human civilization. As technology advances and new discoveries emerge, there is an opportunity to expand our understanding of the past and correct long-standing misconceptions. By embracing history in all its complexity, we honor those who fought for their world and ensure that their story remains alive for generations to come. The legacy of the Inca Empire and its final resistance in Vilcabamba is not confined to history books or archaeological ruins. It lives on in the everyday lives of Andean communities today. Traditional weaving techniques, passed down through generations, continue to produce intricate textiles that reflect the artistic sophistication of the Inca civilization. Farmers in the Sacred Valley still cultivate crops using methods perfected centuries ago, adapting ancient knowledge to modern needs. Festivals honoring the cycles of nature and ancestral spirits blend pre-Columbian traditions with Catholic influences, creating vibrant celebrations that keep cultural memory alive.
Language, too, remains a powerful link to the past. Quechua, the language of the Incas, is still spoken by millions across the Andes, serving as a living testament to the endurance of Inca heritage. In recent years, efforts to promote bilingual education and media in Quechua have gained momentum, ensuring that younger generations remain connected to their roots. Music, dance, and storytelling continue to play essential roles in preserving history, transmitting the wisdom of ancestors in ways that written records cannot capture. By recognizing and supporting these cultural expressions, society acknowledges that history is not something locked in the past. It is a dynamic force that shapes identity, community, and the future. As the story of Vilcabamba reaches its conclusion, the journey of understanding and preserving Andean heritage continues. Historians, archaeologists, and indigenous advocates must work together to ensure that the legacy of the Inca resistance is accurately represented and widely recognized. Continued research into the final years of the empire will uncover new details, correcting misconceptions and providing a more complete picture of this pivotal era. Equally important is the inclusion of indigenous voices in historical discourse, allowing descendants of the Inca people to share their perspectives and reclaim narratives that have long been shaped by colonial interpretations. Education plays a critical role in sustaining this legacy. Schools, museums, and digital platforms must incorporate the full scope of Andean history, moving beyond simplified accounts of conquest to explore the complexities of resistance, adaptation, and cultural survival. Public awareness campaigns can highlight the significance of Vilcabamba and its impact on modern indigenous identity, fostering a deeper appreciation for the enduring strength of Andean communities. Ultimately, remembering Vilcabamba is not just about honoring the past, it is about shaping a future where history is acknowledged, respected, and actively preserved for generations to come. The story of Vilcabamba is a testament to the indomitable spirit of resistance that defines human history. Across time and continents, oppressed peoples have fought to preserve their identities, their lands, and their freedoms in the face of overwhelming power. The last Inca rulers, from Manco Inca Yupanqui to Tupac Amaru, embodied this spirit, refusing to accept subjugation despite the odds stacked against them. Their struggle was not merely a military conflict, but a declaration of cultural survival, a refusal to let their people's history be erased by conquest. This spirit of resistance echoes through the ages, manifesting in the revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries, the civil rights movements of the 20th century, and the ongoing fights for indigenous rights today. Every act of defiance, whether on a battlefield or in a courtroom, carries the weight of those who came before. The fall of Vilcabamba did not mark the end of the Andean people's fight. It was merely one chapter in a much larger story of perseverance. As we reflect on this history, we were reminded that the struggle for justice and self-determination is never truly over. The lessons of Vilcabamba urge us to honor the past while continuing to advocate for the rights of marginalized communities today. In doing so, we ensure that the voices of those who resisted are never forgotten, and that their legacy continues to inspire future generations.